Hi, I'm Scott Shearer. In this video, we're going to take a look at a really useful expression called split. If you ever find yourself in a position where you are trying to find the position of one character in a string, finding another, doing some math, forget about it. Chances are you can use split and get there a lot more efficiently and quickly. So when I am learning a new concept in Power Automate, I like to first read the documentation. You'll find that things go a lot better when you read the documentation first. So here's the Power Automate documentation for the split expression. Return an array that contains substrings separated by commas based on the specified delimiter character in the original string. So we have the split, and then we feed it. The first parameter will be whatever string we want to break apart, and then our delimiter. If we go down a little bit, we have an example. So here we're using the split expression, and the string we're breaking apart is A underscore B underscore C. And we're breaking it apart by the underscore, and the expression will return A, B, and C separated by a comma. All right, easy enough. Let's go see a practical example. So I've already created a flow. Let's go take a look at it. I'm starting this flow with a manual trigger. Manual trigger, the button I should say, is a great way to explore expressions. I can just run the flow and test various expressions. I do this all the time. So we're starting this with a button, and I've got a compose action that has my string. ABC-123-2025. And I am using this string because it's very similar to things that I've seen in the real world. I have seen system-generated reference numbers, for example, wherein the ABC means something, it might mean a product type, 123 means something else, and 2025 being the year. This is very similar to quite a few things that I've seen in real life. This is what we're going to break apart, and we're going to break it apart by the dash. I have my split expression in a compose action and in a variable, and I'll explain in a moment why I'm doing it both ways. Let's take a look at my first one, the compose. I always like to put my expressions here just because it's easier for me to see what I've done without having to drill into it. So this is a note, by the way. So I would go up here, I would add a note and put my expression in there as well. That's also great as a backup. If I screw something up, I can go copy and paste from what I have in my note. But here's the expression, split, and then outputs my string. All I did here was go down to dynamic content, select outputs, and that it put this here, outputs my string, comma, and inside of single quotes, the dash. All right. Now I'm doing that exact same thing here, only this time I'm initializing a variable, and that variable is an array, and I have the exact same expression. Split my string by a dash. Let's run this and let's see what that does for us. So I'm going to save, and let's test this. Manually test, run the flow, and let's take a look at how this take a look at the outputs. All right, it is done. So here you see my string and exactly what we thought it would be. The result of the split, look down here, is inside of the brackets, ABC 123 2025. It did exactly what I wanted it to do. Now, this variable I initialized as an array, and it looks exactly like the output in my compose action. Now that I have this, I want to be able to use the individual elements of that array. And let me show you how we can do that. Let's come back, and let's assume that I want the first element of that array. In other words, ABC. So if I click on that, and let's take a look at the expression, you can see I'm using an expression called first. First will give you the first element of an array So I'm saying very, very simply, I'm using the first expression and I feed it my array, and I can do something very similar if I want the last element, in other words, the 2025, the year. As opposed to first, I'm using last. So the syntax is very simple. Last and then the array. Let's test this manually. We'll run the flow. And it's run. So let's take a look at our first element. And you can see we have ABC. Our last element should be the 2025, and it is. Now, we've talked about how to access the first and last element in the array. What about anything in the middle? Our array has 3 elements, and I want to reference the middle element in that array. So let's take a look at my syntax, and I've done this for both the output of the variable and the compose action. So if I click on the variable, you can see all I'm doing is referencing that variable. Once again, dynamic content, select it. It'll put this in here. Question mark, and then inside of square brackets, the element number. In most languages, including FX in Power Automate, arrays are numbered starting at 0. So if you want the second element, that would be number 1. If you want the third element, that would be number 2. So all I need to do is reference the array and then question mark inside of square brackets the element number. I've done the same thing for the compose action where I had the split. I got this from dynamic content. I didn't put a question mark, but you really should, and a number 1. Let's see. Let's run this. Take a look at the output of the second element, and you can see I had 2 expressions, so I have it twice, 1, 2, 3, which is the middle part of that array. So it did exactly what we wanted to do. One more thing I want to show you, and that is how to loop through the array. Now, you won't do this that often, but occasionally you'll want to loop through the output of the split action, or split expression, excuse me. So I'm using an apply to each, and it's easiest to do this if you have an array variable. Even though the output of the split action is an array, and I have that array in a compose action, Power Automate just doesn't want to play nice with that. You'll find it works a lot easier if you have that the output inside of a variable. So I'm going to reference the variable here. So what do I want to my apply to each to loop through? My array, right? So all I had to do was select that array from dynamic properties. Now, what are we looping through? This takes a little explanation. I want to loop through the current item, whatever element I'm on right now. That's what I want to show. Now, if I hover over here, over current item, notice that it says item and then open and close parens. Let me get rid of this. I'll come over here and simply enter item. And try that again, item, and then open and close parens. And that simply gives me the current element that I'm looping through. There's no more complicated than that. When we save this and run it and we go back in, you will see that this says, it doesn't say item anymore. It'll say current item. Why? I don't know, but I do know that that's the way it works. So let me save this and test. Our flow ran. Let's take a look at the output. I'm going to click on current item, and you can see we are on our first loop. It gives us the first element, which is ABC. We'll go to the next one, 1, 2, 3, and then the last element, 2025. Once again, this is why I used the variable. If you're not going to loop through like this, it doesn't matter whether you use a compose action or a variable for your split action. So I will leave it at that. Now, there's going to be an additional video on Split where I'll cover some more advanced concepts with Split. If you liked this session, please subscribe and come back for part 2 of our video on Split.